Good day, Industrial Advisor listeners, and thank you for tuning in. If you have not subscribed, please do so by clicking subscribe wherever you podcast. Click the like button and hit the bell if you want notifications of when we put up new content. Leave us a comment about anything we discuss here today or general comments about the show. Now, let's get into it.
Welcome to our Industrial Advisors podcast. You have Bill Condon and Matt McGregor, and we have our colleague and friend, Rafael McCadden, out of our Mexico City office. Rafael is currently our Director of Industrial and Logistics Division in Mexico. He's a member of a steering committee for the Colliers L&T Group as well. Extremely active in the Mexico industrial real estate market, as active as anyone. We've done a lot of deals with Rafael over the years, and so great to finally have you on the podcast, and I appreciate you joining us.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Bill and Matt. Absolutely happy that you're inviting me to this podcast. And yet, a lot is going on in Mexico besides the elections.
Well, the first thing that's going on in Mexico is you're about to pay for your fourth wedding. You have 4 daughters. So we've done some deals with you, but apparently you're going to need some more, right? Pay for these weddings.
Yes, please. I definitely need more deals. The wedding is 1 month away. I don't know if we're going to close one in 1 month, but it'll still help.
Well, put it on your credit card. We'll catch up. Well, congratulations. That's impressive.
Thanks.
That's awesome. Let's dive into it. So, the biggest reason why we wanted to have you on the show, other than we love you, is boy, is Mexico becoming a very popular topic. And you were kind enough to send me a big sheet of statistics that you always do an impeccable job of. And we will put it in the footnotes here for the listeners to dive into the details. But let's start with the big one, which is nearshoring. So obviously nearshoring for the U.S. has hit Mexico probably more significantly than anywhere in the world. One statistic on here, and for the listeners, Mexico's overall vacancy in the entire country is about 1.5%. That compares to just under 6% in the U.S. So an extremely tight market. But get this, 72% of your current activity is nearshoring. Is that correct?
Yes, it's unbelievable what's happening in Mexico. Actually, the industrial market in Mexico has always sailed the same directions that the U.S. market. I would say this for the first time, Mexico is being tremendously successful while, the U.S. is experiencing some slowdown. So, as you said, vacancy, everything that is recorded is historically breaking any statistics that were there. So absorption, unfortunately, these rates also are going up the roof, and land prices, industrial, of course, yes. So, but, for one thing that, people in the U.S. might not notice is that Mexico, even though it's it has pyramids, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a very young country.
Yes.
The baby boomer generation in Mexico, is an average 29 years old. So that makes Mexico also, that's one of the opportunities that you can see in Mexico, because, the labor market in the U.S. is tight.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that it's not tight in certain cities of Mexico, but, people need to work, and people are young, and they are really, joining, I would say, the global economy within Mexico, because there's a lot of, Fortune 100, or whichever way you want to call them, that a lot of companies that need a high-skilled young labor force.
Yeah, we've been listening to, Peter Zion for years talk about the young labor force in Mexico in relation to the old labor force in China, and how I think it was 2019 that Mexico would become the United States' #1 trading partner. And for the rest of our lives, that would be the statistic, right? And looking at this map, it looks like Mexico is taking over the industrial world. And are you Do you think that the key component is that young labor pool at the average age of 29?
That's for sure one, but there's another couple factors there that really, I would say, detonated the nearshoring effect, and that was COVID, which we experienced, and we at least we survived, right? That COVID basically, besides hitting people, it really hit the supply chain, global supply chain, I would say.
Mhm.
And so a lot of companies are now saying this will not happen to me again,
That's right.
right? So so now regionalization and also the incentives, even though they go directly to US CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, they are in a way also helping investments coming to Mexico, mainly US, also from other countries like China, but European as well. So yes, that's so yes, COVID helped tremendously. And well, they, as you know, the 25% import tax from China to the US also helped out.
Let's talk about that for a second because we have heard on other podcasts and other media sources that a lot of the nearshoring done in Mexico was financed by China. And if you drive around Tijuana, half the buildings have Chinese logos on them to avoid that tariff coming directly from China and just now placing it in Mexico. Tell us a little bit about that. Is that true?
Yes, it is true. Yes, I would say if you ask me how many deals I was doing 4 years ago with China, I would say none. You ask me today how many calls I'm having early in the morning and late at night, I would say a ton.
Wow.
Yes, there is definitely I would say, a tsunami of Chinese companies coming into Mexico.
And tell us a little bit about the types of companies because I'm reading your sheet here, just overwhelmed with the types of industries, automotive being the top one. But what type of deals are you working on and what type of deals are you seeing on the onshore? Just tell us about a lot of them.
Sure, sure. Well, automotive, yes, by far is the number one industry that, it's the number one industry in Mexico as a whole, but it is the one that is experiencing more nearshoring now with EV even more, right? So actually, I think it was just this morning or yesterday, some new statistics came out of exports from Mexico into the US on the auto industry, and most of the indicators were 30%. So cars that were exported for the first 2 months of this year compared to last year, 30% up. That's crazy.
That is crazy. What are some of the brands?
Well, GM continues to be the number one exporter into Mexico. So they it's about over 25% of the vehicles that are exported to Mexico are GM. So yeah, GM is definitely still the king of the mountain, I'd say, on that. There are some Chinese companies that have established, assembly plants, and there should be more coming.
Interesting. So you talked a little bit about on the investment side, going back to the investment side and how China's investment is impacting things. Who are your logical buyers of core large industrial buildings in Mexico in today's environment? Who are you seeing most often?
Yeah, well, most of the buyers are actually REITs, Mexican REITs, which are buying portfolios here and there, right? So that would be the number one source of and buyers of industrial real estate. They also develop. Some of these REITs have their own development companies, some don't. But, you know, in contrast, I'd say with the way that we've been doing business with US global companies, which prefer to lease, Chinese prefer to buy.
Hmm.
So mainly they're buying land, not as much buildings because, vacancy rates are so low that they buy land and they buy large parcels of land And of course, they need a lot of energy and water. So right now in Mexico, especially energy, although water as well, are becoming scarce. So you have to really, I would say, team up with people that know where there's going to be the right power, because it could be one industrial park next to another one, and one will have power and the other one will just
Mhm.
make promises.
Hmm.
I'm
Interesting.
curious on the power, what are your major power sources in Mexico and what's the infrastructure for the future? What's the focus?
Well, there is a lot of fossil fuel. Yeah.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, there was a growing green energy phenomena happening, mainly private. So there's been a lot of solar parks, wind parks, and so that's how we got to 50% of the government producing energy. But there has been for years now a lot of solar farms, and in various regions of Mexico. But unfortunately, besides not putting the money where they should be, which is in the power infrastructure, the government decided to block in private investment into the energy sector. So that
Hmm.
hasn't helped.
Yeah, I guess. So you guys are getting a little bit thin on power. Is there any infrastructure to go into anything to enhance that? Nuclear, anything on the horizon?
Mexico already has one nuclear plant in Veracruz, and that happened many years ago. So I don't see much of that going on. But I would say most of the newer generation and the greener power plants are combined cycle run mainly by natural gas.
Got it.
With the industrial market being in some kind of healthy position right now, you talk sub 2% vacancy. What's your prediction for 2024 and maybe even going into 2025? You know, is there gonna be a lot more product built that's gonna help give some of those tenants relief and more options, or is it just gonna get tighter and tighter?
Well, I think that it's going to get tighter the next few months, although there was legislation that was presented by the president that the Supreme Court actually voided. So that should start bringing in more investment from the private energy sector, which is good news.
Mhm.
So,
For
yeah,
sure.
and everybody is rushing. Everybody can see the opportunity to build more solar farms and just really move into, for one thing, you know, before you would recognize maybe three energy companies in Mexico besides CFE. Now, I mean, every time I look around, there's five more energy companies in Mexico.
Yeah.
So yes, it's growing. They're really trying to push because they see the opportunity.
Yeah, it's another statistics when you talk about this tech and green energy and stuff that I was a little taken back by is I think Mexico has had the reputation for a long time in the United States to, house some of our cheaper labor. And now I look at it, and this one of your statistics is, I mean, when I look on the types of companies moving here, it's a lot of technology. It's amazing amount of technology. These are not low end jobs. And then I see this statistic that says Mexico is now a top 10 country in the world for graduating engineers and technical fields. So tell us about that a little bit and the changing environment related with higher skilled jobs.
Of course, yeah, that's a great question. Actually, I'm not quite sure what was the source of this, but Mexico, that has 130 million, US has close to 350 million. So it's almost three times the population. Mexico graduates the same number of engineers per year than the US.
Wow, that's
That
amazing.
that tells you a lot.
Yeah,
Yes. And
I
yeah. So
that
you can
that makes a lot
hire
of sense.
someone out of college, an engineer just out of college, for $500 a month.
Wow.
Wow, that's amazing.
Just out of college, right? They're learning and stuff, but yeah, about $500, which is, if I would say even $1,000, it will still be very low. Right.
That's right. That's right. Wow, that's amazing. Well, the last question I have for you, I always ask you when I see you in person because, our media here in the US is not always as transparent as the industrial podcast here. But how is the relationship between the US and Mexico right now?
Yes, good question. Well, I would say it's a good, commercially speaking, it couldn't be better, right?
Mhm.
85% of Mexican exports go across the border into the U.S. So that's, it was about 80%. Now it's 85%. So, but if you go and say, okay, but what about the other way around, right? It's a two-way street. Yes, it is, because actually exports from the US into Mexico are also, you are our number one source of imports into Mexico
Mm.
also. So, and China maybe, but when you're talking about machinery and equipment and all of that, most of it, comes from the US. So commercially speaking, great. Well, both countries are having elections this year, which
Mhm.
only happens every 12 years. So this time, because you have elections every 4, we have elections every 6. So it's interesting how that's going to turn out. We hope that based on our commercial ties, things will continue the way they have been so far. Of course, the USMCA, which was called before NAFTA, is working, right?
Mhm.
That's one of the reasons why there's a lot of investment and a lot of trade between both countries. So
Mhm.
Mexico also invests in the US heavily, more than you would think.
Interesting. Well, as always, it's fascinating catching up with you. We greatly appreciate you being on the show. Look forward to seeing you at the upcoming conferences. And again, congratulations on the wedding.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Th-
Matt.
Thank
Thanks a
Bill.
you.
lot.
See you soon.
You
Take care.
Great
bet.
to see you,
See you,
bud.
bud.
Bye.